The sun was setting behind the jagged peaks of the mountains, casting long shadows across the sprawling fields of Wilson Ranch. Birds took to the sky, a flurry of memories and whispers of freedom. But that evening, there was something heavy in the air, a storm brewing, not of weather but of confrontation. A low hum grew louder, shaking the earth beneath the farmer's boots. Jake Wilson stood on the porch of his weathered home, the railing rough against his palms. His heart raced as he squinted into the distance. A gang of motorbikes rolled fiercely down the gravel road, black leather jackets gleaming in the dying light, engines roaring like a beast just unleashed. Jake knew they were coming. The rumors had echoed around town, a land acquisition, they called it. "They don't need to do this," he muttered, frustration rising in his throat. The ranch had been in his family for generations, a sanctuary cultivated with sweat and love. He wouldn't let it slip into the hands of faceless businessmen more interested in their bank balances than the blood, sweat, and tears that had gone into every inch of this land. As the motor crew approached, their tires kicking up dust and gravel, a bracing wind swept through the fields, whispering secrets of defiance. The lead rider, a broad-shouldered man named Terry, lifted his visor, revealing eyes steely with determination and a hint of arrogance. He dismounted, planting his boots firmly into the earth, the engine dying with a guttural sigh behind him. He shouted, his voice booming like a thunderclap across the acreage. The crew fanned out behind him, an intimidating wall of leather and bravado. "You're gonna want to get off this land while you can. We've got big plans here." It would have been easy, so easy for Jake to feel fear creeping up inside him, gnawing at his resolve. But he stood tall, shoulders squared. "This land isn't yours." A ripple of incredulity spread through the crew. Terry smirked, an unsettling glint in his eyes. "Our investors want this place. We're prepared to do whatever it takes to make it ours." Jake felt the rising heat of anger surging through him, filling his veins. Progress was a beautiful word, often weaponized. It became clear to him in that moment. This wasn't just about land. This was about principle, about standing up for what was right. "I've worked this land my entire life. You show up here thinking a couple of threats will scare me off." Terry stepped closer, his breath mingling with the evening air, heavy with the scent of dust and defiance. "You're not thinking straight, old man." Jake's heart thundered, the fight awakening a spirit within him. Around them, the land pulsed with history. Tall grass swayed in the breeze, and the trees stood like silent witnesses, rooted in time. The sun dipped lower, colors flickering like flames fighting for survival. A wild bird took flight, its call slicing through the stillness. Without warning, the gang surged forward as if rehearsed, but Jake didn't flinch. Instead, he reached for a nearby fence post, gripping it tightly. "You're outnumbered, Terry," he declared, his voice a steady resonance against the clamor around him. He wasn't just talking about people. He was talking about determination, about community. Terry laughed, a cold, cruel sound that echoed across the fields. "You're all alone here." Jake inhaled deeply, feeling the rush of rural life coursing through him, every sunrise, every drop of rain, every hard-fought harvest. He called out, knowing he needed the support of those who lived close by. "Anyone, help!" From the shadows of the nearby barn, familiar faces began to emerge, neighbors, friends, all the people who understood the weight of this moment. The tide of unity shifted and strength filled the air. There was Tom with his wiry frame and Clara with her fierce eyes. They were not just watching, they were ready. Terry faltered for a moment, his confidence shaken. Jake stepped forward, the intensity of his posture solid. "This isn't just about land, it's about family, our way of life. You think we're going to roll over because you came snarling up the road?" The growing crowd behind Jake echoed his resolve. Tom raised a shovel, Clara brandished a pitchfork. They were not armed with conventional weapons, but with grit, fury, and an unwavering love for their home. Clara shouted, her voice ringing with fierce clarity. Terry, for a moment, appeared uncertain, his bravado cracking like dry earth. But then that smirk returned. "You think you can intimidate us with kitchen tools?" And just like that, the tension snapped like a taut cable. Terry raised a hand, signaling his crew to advance, but they hesitated, eyes darting between their leader and the rising wall of defiance. "I know what you're feeling right now," Jake interjected, lowering his voice, shifting the energy of the moment. You think strength is in numbers, in big guns, in threats, but that's not real strength. Real strength is standing your ground when it matters most, when everyone expects you to buckle. There was a hush. Time slowed as the ranch, the fields, and the very earth beneath them seemed to hold its breath. Amidst the backdrop of a crimson sunset, Jake stood unyielding, a portrait of defiance forged from years of labor and love. He represented every farmer, every builder, every dreamer who had come before him. Terry's crew began to shift uneasily. The realization that they might be on the wrong side of this confrontation hung palpably in the air. Just then, a small boy, Jake's son, peeked out from behind the barn, wide-eyed and innocent. The sight of the boy shifted something in the hearts of the motor crew. Jake continued, his voice now intermingling with the fading light of day, filled with a desperate hope. To walk away when things get tough. Terry looked at the boy, and for a fleeting second, uncertainty flickered in his hardened expression. The crew shifted again, doubt filling the air like the scent of impending rain. They climbed onto their bikes, engines idle. "Listen, man, we weren't trying to hurt anyone here," one of Terry's men muttered, casting a glance at his leader. Jake seized this moment, a powerful force propelling his words forward. "This is our home. Go back to whatever city you came from with the knowledge that sometimes it's not worth losing your soul for a plot of land or a paycheck. You have the chance to walk away." The motor crew exchanged glances, and one by one their expressions softened, the fight leaving their bodies. The strength and unity began to weave its magic as they turned, slowly retreating back to their bikes. They revved the engines once more, but this time the sound was different, less a roar of aggression, more a soft retreat. And then, just like that, they set forth, leaving only a cloud of dust in their wake. Jake stayed rooted, heart swelling with pride. He looked at the faces gathered around him, Tom, Clara, all his friends. The weight of the confrontation settled like a comforting blanket. They had stood together and forged an unbreakable bond that night. As the last rays of sun dipped below the horizon, Jake knelt down and hugged his son. "You see that? Sometimes courage doesn't come from fists or weapons." Together, they watched the sky dim, a sense of peace enveloping the land. The battle had been fought and won, not just for a piece of earth, but for the resilience of family, community, and the spirit of standing firm against adversity. The ranch was safe, and with it, so were the dreams that had grown alongside the fields. Days turned into weeks, and while whispers of the confrontation would echo through the town, they would also serve as a reminder that sometimes the fiercest storms are the ones we weather together, where love and unity ride on the winds of courage. Sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow across the fields of Wilson Ranch. An ancient oak tree stood watch, its gnarled branches swaying gently in the evening breeze. Life was quiet, but an unease lingered in the air, thick as the summer heat. For Jake Wilson, a sixth-generation farmer, this evening felt different. There were whispers in town, rumors that a motor crew was heading his way. A rumble split the stillness. Jake paused, wiping sweat from his brow, his heart pounding like a drum in his ears. The sound grew louder, an army of roaring engines cutting through the countryside. As he squinted toward the approaching dust, a knot tightened in his stomach. Motorbikes, gleaming black and chrome, cut down the gravel road leading to his home, tires kicking up clouds of dust that danced in the golden light. They rolled in formation, a menacing wave of leather and metal. At the front was Terry, the leader of the crew, a broad-shouldered man with a reputation for ruthlessness. As he dismounted, the air felt charged, thick with tension like an imminent storm. Jake's jaw clenched. He had heard the stories, how Terry and his gang had taken land from weaker folks, those who didn't have the resolve to fight back. Terry shouted, his voice booming like thunder among the rolling hills. "You've got something we want." Jake stepped forward, his shoulders squared, mirroring the strength of the land that had nurtured him. "This land isn't for sale, Terry," he replied, his voice steady but firm. Terry smirked, a glint of mischief in his eye. "You're going to regret that. We're not the type to just walk away." A hush fell over the ranch as if even the wind held its breath. Jake felt anger bubbling inside him, burning brighter than the sunset. This was more than just a piece of land. This was his heritage, the roots of his family planted deep in the soil. Every inch of this ranch carried memories, his father's laughter, summer nights under the stars, harvests shared with loved ones. With resolve hardening in his chest, Jake stared back at Terry. "I won't back down." The crew behind Terry shifted restlessly, uncertainty flickering in their expressions. These weren't just bikers. They were men looking to carve their place in the world, but they were doing it by pushing others aside. The tension was palpable as Jake felt the eyes of his ancestors upon him, guiding him, urging him to stand firm. "You're outnumbered, old man," Terry taunted, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. In that moment behind the barn, familiar faces began to appear, neighbors, friends, community, people who understood the stakes. They emerged from the shadows, their brows furrowed in determination, hearts aligned with Jake's own. Tom, with his rugged hands worn from labor, stepped forward, followed by Clara, a fierce woman known for standing her ground. The gang of bikers began to hesitate. They were an intimidating force, but numbers were beginning to shift. "We're not going to let you take this place," Tom shouted, raising a shovel overhead like a battle flag. Jake could feel the swell of courage within him. "This is our land. You might have muscle, but we have heart." Terry scoffed, but there was a crack in his bravado, the uncertainty of a man suddenly confronted with a united front. He laughed, but it was more nervous than mocking. "Absolutely," Clara retorted, arms crossed defiantly. "And we'll do it with every ounce of spirit we've got, because this land is not just earth and grass. It's memories, it's lives, it's our future." The sun dipped lower on the horizon, and the shadows grew longer as the tension escalated. Jake refused to let fear cloud his resolve. He glanced around at the faces standing alongside him, people who had fought for their own families, their own pieces of ground. This was bigger than just him. It was about standing together against the forces that sought to swallow them whole. "Your threats don't scare us, Terry," Jake declared, the steadfastness in his voice rising. "Go back to wherever you came from and tell them that we will not be intimidated." For a moment, silence hung in the air, heavy and charged, like a frayed wire ready to snap. The gang exchanged looks filled with trepidation. They were fierce, but they were also human, a realization that settled in Terry's chest as he took a step back, glancing at his crew. Terry's voice had lost some of its edge. Everyone could see it. He was beginning to falter. Right there in that space, he was caught between the bravado he had built his reputation on and the reality of a heart that might understand family and love. "This is your last chance to leave, Terry," Tom said, his voice steady and strong. "If you walk away now, you can save face. You can go back to your life without scars." The temperature seemed to drop as the evening deepened. The vibrancy of the sunset faded into a roll of shadows, a backdrop for a standoff that held lives and futures. More neighbors emerged, forming an unyielding wall. What Terry saw in that moment was the emotional strength of unity. It could dismantle his bravado, his strength in numbers, and he didn't have a plan for that. Clara pressed further, a challenge in her eyes. "Because we're here, all of us are here." The motor crew shifted, and Jake sensed doubt erupting in their ranks. Terry let out a frustrated growl, visibly rattled. The bad boy persona wasn't cutting it anymore. He was no longer the predator in this territory. He was a step away from being the prey. And then the first bike turned. A hesitant wheel spun away from the group, and Jake's heart raced with the feeling of hope. The crew began to pull away, hesitantly at first, with uncertainty painted on their faces. As they retreated, Jake felt a rush of relief mixed with disbelief. He stood taller, the weight of his tired shoulders lifting. The spirit of community had triumphed, and they had sent the message loud and clear. No one would take what they held dear. They watched until the last bike disappeared down the dirt road, the sound of engines fading into the distance, like whispers carried away by the wind. A cheer erupted from the friends and neighbors who had gathered around Jake. Someone shouted. Laughter spilled into the twilight, intertwining with disbelief and triumph. But Jake, amidst the celebration, felt something else, a raw awareness of the battles that often lie beyond physical confrontations. This was not merely a fight for land. It was a struggle for identity, dignity, and a fierce love that could not be snuffed out by someone else's desires. "We held our ground," he declared, his voice strong yet humble, echoing the collective spirit that bound them. "And from now on, we need to stand together." this community, this land. They mean everything. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, glistening like diamonds scattered across the sky, the ranch felt alive with possibility. Together, they celebrated not just the retreat of the motor crew, but the realization that they were a brotherhood and sisterhood, bound by their stories, each of them a vibrant thread in this tapestry of resilience. In the days that followed, they fortified the ranch, reinforcing fences and dusting off equipment that had languished in neglect. A renewed sense of purpose filled the air, and the echo of laughter blended with the melodies of the land. Each day felt like a new beginning, where Jake found deeper connections with those around him. They shared meals, stories, and laughter under the vast expanse of the stars. The laughter of children drifted through the fields, mingling with the buzzing of bees, reminding everyone that life was for living, and they had fought not just for land, but for the essence of what made them whole. Jake understood more fully now that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was choosing to act despite it. They had faced down a fierce storm, not just as individuals, but as a community determined to protect their way of life. And that very notion would echo through the valleys, whispered in the rustling leaves and the wind coursing over the hills, reminding anyone who would listen that true strength is not defined by size or threats, but by the unbreakable spirit that binds those who stand together. The sound of rumbling engines tore through the calm afternoon as Jake Wilson leaned against the weathered fence of his ranch. He squinted against the sharp sunlight, a knot tightening in his stomach. A dust storm kicked up in the distance, swirling like a predator stalking its prey. Motorbikes, dark and menacing, descended upon Wilson Ranch, a wave of leather and metal that seemed almost to hunt him down. He knew they were coming. Word had spread around town about Terry's gang, a crew notorious for storming into small towns with threats and loud motorcycles. Jake had heard the stories, how they'd coerced families into selling their land and how fear was often their weapon. But fear was unfamiliar territory for Jake. The ranch was his family's legacy, a treasure passed down through generations, each inch of earth soaked in memories and love. As the gang pulled closer, engines roaring like thunder, Jake straightened his back, determination setting his jaw. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the fields, turning the landscape into a scene from a movie, one full of tension, anticipation, and unwavering resolve. He felt his heart race but pushed the fear aside. He was not about to back down. The lead rider, Terry, dismounted his bike with the confidence of a man accustomed to getting his way. He strutted over, flanked by his crew, clad in leather jackets that seemed to absorb the fading warmth of the day. Terry called out, his voice booming and raw. "We've got a little business to discuss." Jake stepped forward, each step a testament to the strength coursing through him. "This land isn't for sale, Terry. It's been in my family for generations." Terry flashed a smirk, that arrogant smile of a man who believed he was untouchable. "You might want to reconsider. We have plans, and they don't include you standing in our way." Harder than it needed to be, that phrase echoed in Jake's mind. When had anyone ever gotten what they wanted by intimidation? Every farmer valiantly defended their land, their home, their legacy. Jake could feel the sun setting not just in the sky but on his ancestors' dreams. Would they let these motorcyclists sweep them away? Jake replied, the words steady but laden with unyielding passion. "You think noise and threats will scare me off?" Terry stepped closer, his face taut with irritation. The smell of gasoline mingled with the thick, warm air. "You're all alone out here, old man. You don't have backup." But just then, a movement caught Jake's eye. From behind the barn, familiar faces began to emerge, his neighbors, his friends, people who understood the weight of what was at stake. People who knew that every blade of grass was cultivated with toil, every quiet sunrise heralded hard work. Tom, a tall man with calloused hands, was the first to step forward, an iconic shovel in his grasp, raising it as though it were a sword. He shouted, his voice echoing courage across the ranch. Jake felt a surge of hope. This wasn't just his fight anymore. "Come on, folks," he shouted, the strength of community swelling within him. Clara, fierce and determined, stood beside Tom, pitchfork raised high, her presence a vivid reminder that they were stronger together. Terry's crew hesitated, the momentary uncertainty making the air electric. Terry sneered, but the bravado in his voice had wavered. Jake took a step forward, meeting Terry's gaze. "You think we're afraid? Fear is not what's driving us. It's love for our home, our families." The colors of the sunset deepened, darkening to shades of violet and crimson as the standoff unfolded. Jake took another breath, his heart racing not with fear but with defiance. This isn't just land, it's years of hard work, laughter, and love. Terry retaliated, but there was a twitch in his eye, a flicker of doubt. Behind Jake, voices rose in solidarity. Someone shouted, a wave of fervor brushing over the gathering. The farm was alive with spirit, a pulse, a living heartbeat of community woven through every fiber. "There's still time to walk away, Terry," Jake called out, his voice strong and unwavering. "You can leave with your pride intact." For a moment, the only sound was the rustle of the wind, the evening air heavy with unspoken words. The motor crew exchanged nervous glances. Jake felt the anxieties of every member of the crewmen who had perhaps stood against their own fears, but were now caught in a confrontation they hadn't anticipated. As the sun dipped lower, casting everything into shadow, Terry glanced at his crew. The facade of confidence cracked just enough to let them see he was just a man, not the monster he'd crafted himself to be. Jake pressed, fighting the rising hope that they could turn this moment in their favor. And then, like a taut rubber band snapping, one member of Terry's crew stepped back. "I'm not up for this," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Behind him, another man shrugged off his jacket, the leather armor of bravado slipping away. Seeing the cracks in their formation, Jake pressed on. "Your strength doesn't come from the numbers, but from what you believe in. You have the chance to walk away." One by one, the bikers hesitated, uncertainty flickering in their expressions as they glanced at each other. It was like watching a house of cards beginning to topple. Terry stood, visibly frustrated, visibly trapped in the moment. This wasn't just about territory for him. It had become an ideological battle, a confrontation between courage and intimidation. He spat, his bravado spent, the power of his gang waning. The riders turned their bikes, revving the engines one last time, but it felt different than before, almost like an apology. They left, kicking up dust as they disappeared down the long, winding road, the sunset framing their retreat in a haunting palette of fading oranges and deepening shadows. A cheer erupted behind Jake as the heavy weight of tension lifted. They had held their ground. They had stood shoulder to shoulder, facing down not just a gang of bikers, but a way of life that threatened to overshadow theirs. Tom shouted, laughter ringing out like bells in the quiet of the night. But Jake remained still, taking a moment to reflect on the complex mix of emotions swirling within him. Resilience thrummed through his veins, but beneath it all was a deep awareness of the hard work ahead. He had not only fought for his land, he had fought for the community he cherished. "Let this be a lesson for all of us," Jake said, his voice cutting through the celebration. "Can't take our home for granted. We need to stand together. This is our ranch, our legacy." With that, the night blossomed to life. They gathered, laughter blending with the vibrant sounds of celebration as the stars began to twinkle overhead, finding their places like silent guardians of the land they fought so hard to preserve. Days turned into weeks as the community fortified what they had fought for. Neighbors helped to strengthen fences, cleared brush, and made plans to protect their way of life. They exchanged stories and laughter in the warmth of twilight, sharing not only meals but a profound connection that grew deeper with every passing day. Across the fields, life thrived again. Children played among the crops, the joy that glimmered in their eyes the loudest proclamation that they were home. When Jake scanned the horizon, he felt the pulse of his ancestors behind him, as if their spirits rode the winds that swept through the trees, proud and unyielding. In moments of quiet reflection, Jake absorbed the vibrant beauty around him. He began planting seeds not just in the earth but in the hearts of those he cared about. He shared his values, the importance of standing strong, teaching his son that courage isn't a flash of anger. It's a quiet resolve rooted deeply in love for family, land, and life itself. That day, when they faced down the storm, would forever echo in their hearts. It was a day that taught them that threats might come bearing down with brute force, but they could be met with an unbreakable unity. a reminder that strength exists in numbers, but true strength lies in hearts that beat for one another and fight for what is right. As the seasons changed, Jake felt a deep sense of gratitude for the community he now fully embraced. The ranch thrived not just because of the land, but because of the people who shared the burdens and joys of life together. In their united spirit, they found a profound strength that would echo beyond the hills and valleys, leaving a legacy richer than the fertile ground they tilled, one that whispered stories of courage long after the dust of that fateful day settled, its memory etched deep in the heart of Wilson Ranch. The sky above the Wilson Ranch was an endless blue, a typical summer day in rural America. Jake Wilson, a sturdy man with weathered hands, stood on the porch of his farmhouse, sipping on iced tea and surveying the land he loved. But today the air felt heavy, almost charged, like the quiet before a storm. Suddenly, the calm was shattered by the unmistakable roar of a dozen motorcycle engines approaching. As the sound grew louder, Jake's heart sank. He had heard the rumors. Terry's motor crew was coming to town, planning to force local farmers to sell their land for a new highway. An uneasy feeling flared inside him, a surge of adrenaline mixed with determination. He had spent a lifetime cultivating this farm, pouring love and sweat into every inch of soil. He wasn't about to let some bikers take it away. The first bike came into view, gleaming black and chrome, kicking up dust as it thundered down the gravel road. Jake inhaled deeply, grounding himself in the moment. Just beyond the bike stood the rolling fields of corn, the old oak tree that had witnessed generations, and the barn with its peeling red paint filled with memories. He could hear the faint rustle of leaves whispering encouragement, urging him to stand his ground. As the motor crew rolled closer, led by the imposing figure of Terry, a tall man with a beard and an air of menace, Jake's grip tightened around his iced tea. "You don't want to do this," he muttered under his breath. The riders, clad in leather jackets and tattoos that told their own stories, fanned out like a pack of wolves, their presence suffocating the calm of the ranch. Terry dismounted, a cocky grin plastered on his face. He bellowed, his voice echoing across the fields. "We've come to talk business. It's time for you to sell this miserable piece of land." Jake's heart raced. Anger surged through him, mingled with a fierce protectiveness. He stepped forward, a fire igniting in his chest. "This land has been in my family for generations." With a smirk, Terry crossed his arms. "You think you can stand your ground against all of us? You're just one old farmer. This isn't the Old West, Jake." But Jake wasn't just an old farmer. He was a man rooted in the land, dedicated to the life he had built. "This place isn't just dirt and grass. It's my home. It's where I've raised my family, where I've built my life." The gang shook their heads, a mix of disbelief and amusement crossing their faces. Terry chuckled, leaning into the bravado that masked his doubt. "You thinking about fighting us? That's a pretty bold move." Jake turned to look at the rolling fields one last time before locking eyes with Terry. "Numbers don't scare me. Love for this land and the people who live on it give me strength." In that moment, Jake felt the warmth of the sun on his back, a reminder of all those who had stood with him through adversity. His neighbors, folks who had faced their own challenges, began to trickle onto the porch and peek from behind barns. Each face, a testament that they were far from alone. Someone stepped forward. It was Tom, a neighbor with arms thick from years of labor. He challenged, standing tall behind Jake. "We've got shovels and pitchforks, and we know how to use them." A murmur spread through the crowd, rising in unison, a chorus of resilience. Clara, a woman with fiery spirit, grabbed a pitchfork from the barn, raising it like a banner of defiance. Terry's confidence wavered, and for the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. It was slight but palpable, like a crack in his facade. Jake felt the rush of energy swell among his neighbors, a collective heartbeat of defiance resonating within them. "Look around you, Terry," Jake said, gesturing toward the gathering crowd. "We're not afraid to stand together. You might have bikes, but we have this, our home, our heritage." The sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the horizon with shades of orange and gold as the tension thickened. Jake could sense the air crackling with uncertainty on both sides. He took a deep breath, trying to pull strength from the earth beneath his feet. Jake challenged, his voice steady, cutting through the mounting anxiety. You can walk away now, or we can settle this the hard way." The gang exchanged uncertain glances. It was as if the weight of their bravado was slowly fading. Terry's eyes darted between his men, visibly struggling to salvage his reputation, a king caught with no solid ground beneath him. Then, as if a tide had turned, Jake saw Terry's gang begin to waver. One by one, they shifted their weight, some loosening their grips on their handlebars. Doubt clouded their eyes, the sheer will of Jake and his neighbors somehow infiltrating their armor. Terry said finally, but his voice lacked conviction, cracking like brittle glass. Jake's spirit soared at the sight of Terry's faltering command. He stepped forward, leaning slightly into the fading sunset, the colors casting a glow on his face. "I'll take my chances. What you call a hard fight is just another day for us." And then it happened, a slow retreat as Terry's crew began to turn their bikes around. The sound of engines revving started to dissipate, replaced by the rustle of grass, the distant chirping of crickets, and the collective gasps of astonished townsfolk. They were witnessing strength against intimidation, unity against division. Jake's heart swelled with triumph, with every neighbor standing resolute beside him. They had faced a storm and emerged victorious, proving that love for their home and each other would never falter. Terry's silhouette sat taller than his men, but his bravado was gone. With one last glance, he revved his bike and drove off, leaving only the dust swirling behind him, a stark contrast against the vibrant colors of the sunset. The cheer erupted among the crowd, voices breaking into laughter and cries of celebration. Someone shouted, and soon the air was filled with hearty cheers, folks hugging and high-fiving one another, pride swelling in their chests. They had fought not just for land, but for their lives, their community, their shared hopes and dreams. Jake took a moment to soak it all in the camaraderie, the laughter, the realization that they were never meant to fight alone. He felt each emotion, a cocktail of disbelief and joy. The harshness of fear melted away, replaced by the sweet taste of victory. But it was more than a celebration of triumph. It was an awakening. They had discovered the strength rooted in their shared history, the legacy of hard work that had paved the way for this moment. The ranch wasn't just a piece of property. It was a testament to the lives woven together in the dirt and sweat of generations. As twilight draped the land in a soft embrace, Jake gathered the folks around him. "This day should remind us that when we stand together, we can face anything," he said, his voice steady, but emotion lacing every word. "We must continue to protect our community, not only from those like Terry, but from anything that threatens our way of life." The crowd nodded, faces illuminated by the soft glow of unity. The moment became more than just an encounter with a motor crew. It was a pledge to look out for one another, a reminder that standing together was a way of life. In the months that followed, the ranch flourished even more. Jake and his neighbors worked alongside each other, tending to crops and livestock, sharing meals and laughter. The days turned into weeks and then months. Each day felt like an extension of the fight they had won together. Community gatherings became the norm, where families shared stories, laughter, and struggles. There was a sense of purpose, a bond that grew deeper with every harvest, every shared meal. Underneath the vast expanse of stars that twinkled above the ranch, they formed a family. The sun would rise each morning over the fields, painting the landscape anew. The laughter of children filled the air, their joy a reminder of the lives they fought for. Jake often found himself staring at the horizon, pride filling his heart, a heart that now beat for the promise of tomorrow. That one day when the motor crew stormed the ranch had ignited something larger. It was a profound realization that they wielded a power nothing could conquer. Their love for land and each other overshadowed any threats that came their way. And every sunset brought with it a renewed promise, a promise that as long as they stood united, they would fight for their home, for their community, and for the future that awaited beyond the hills. With every passing season, they honed their labor, stories dancing with the wind as they tended the earth. Jake found hope in the laughter of children playing, in the community that had risen from the ashes of fear. Each day became a testament to resilience, their shared legacy binding them together like the roots of the sturdy oaks that dotted the landscape. Because in the end, It wasn't just about a ranch or a fight against motorcycles. It was about love, unity, and the fierce determination of a community that had learned the power of standing tall together. It was a life worth living, a fight worth fighting, and the dawn of a future as vibrant as the stars that shone overhead, a future woven from the heartbeats of those who refused to back down. It was a blazing summer afternoon when the distant roar of motorcycles shattered the stillness of Wilson Ranch. The sun hung high, casting long shadows across the fields of corn that swayed gently in the breeze. Jake Wilson leaned against the porch railing, iced tea in hand, surveying the land he loved. But today, there was an undercurrent of tension that made him uneasy. As the engines grew louder, the knot in his stomach tightened. He had heard the whispers in town about Terry and his motor crew, a gang known for intimidation and coercion. They didn't just ride for the thrill. They stormed rural properties with the goal of taking over, claiming land for their own purposes. And now they were headed straight for him. The familiar sight of dust swirling in the distance morphed into an ominous cloud as the motorbikes approached. Jake's heart began to pound. He had spent years nurturing this ranch, pouring sweat and love into every inch. This wasn't just land. It was his home, a legacy passed down through generations. No way he would let some gang of bikers take that away. When they finally came into view, a wave of leather and chrome, Jake pushed himself off the railing and set his jaw. Terry, taller than most with a thick beard, led the pack. There was an air of arrogance about him, a swagger that belied his intentions. Dismounting, he strode toward Jake with a cocky grin on his face. He called out, the sound ripping through the warm air. Jake's grip on his iced tea tightened, a mixture of anger and fear swirling through him. He challenged, his voice steady despite the growing dread in his chest. Terry's grin widened. You know, the kind where you sell us your land. All this, he gestured broadly, can be yours in cash. You don't want to end up like the others, do you? Jake felt the heat rising within him. This land has been in my family for generations. The gang of bikers snickered, and Jake felt their laughter cut through him like a knife. You think you can stand your ground against all of us? You're out here all alone, old man. Better think fast. Jake shot back, refusing to be intimidated. You'll push me off my own land. With his heart pounding, he watched Terry's confidence falter just a bit. The laughter from the crew faded, replaced by murmurs of uncertainty. But Jake knew he couldn't back down now. This wasn't just about property, it was about principle. He was fighting for his home, for the values and memories it represented. Just then, he noticed a movement behind the barn. Familiar faces began to emerge, neighbors who had lived nearby for years, friends who understood what was at stake. Tom, with his strong arms and work-worn hands, stepped forward first, his sheer presence a wall of solidarity. He boomed. Clara, fierce and unyielding, brandished a pitchfork as she joined Tom. We won't let you take this land from us. A ripple of encouragement spread through the crowd. Jake felt the surge of their unity filling the space around him like a protective barrier against the oncoming storm. He realized he wasn't fighting alone. Terry's bravado began to crack as he assessed the newly bolstered group. Are you serious? You think a bunch of farmers with gardening tools can take us on? You're all wasting your time. Jake echoed with a defiant fire in his voice. You don't know us, Terry. We're not afraid of you. The sun hung low, casting an amber glow over the field as the tension thickened. Terry leaned in closer, his voice low but still laced with threat. You're gonna regret this. You think you're strong because you have a few friends on your side. Jake felt his heartbeat quicken as he locked eyes with Terry, refusing to flinch. I'd rather face whatever comes than accept defeat without a fight. With that declaration, Jake sensed a renewed strength growing in his chest. He turned to the crowd, their faces serious but resolute. Together, we can make them see that this is our community. The rumble of engines echoed ominously, but Jake focused on his neighbors, people who had shared laughs, tears, and countless seasons of hard work. They were more than just friends, they were family. Let's show them what we're made of, Tom shouted, gripping the shovel tighter, a weapon of the land and the spirit behind it. Surrounded by support, Jake breathed deeply, emboldened by their courageous hearts. Let's stand together. With that, the air shifted. The bikers began to retreat, doubt creeping into their ranks. Jake saw the uncertainty in their eyes, the flicker of fear that indicated they weren't as invincible as they thought. One after another, the bikers hesitated, the tension coiling tighter. Terry's bravado was waning, and for a moment you could see the man behind the mask, vulnerable and unsure. "Walk away, Terry," Jake suggested, his voice steady. "You have a chance to leave this behind now." A murmur swept through the biker crew, and one of them threw a glance at Terry, clearly reconsidering their presence. Jake felt a rush of hope, sensing that change could be possible. Finally, Terry, his face reddened with frustration, gestured to his crew. "You heard the man. We'll find another way to get what we want." Their engines roared to life as one by one, they turned and sped away toward the horizon, leaving a cloud of dust hanging in the warm evening air. The once solid stance of their gang had crumbled, a testament to the power of unity among the farmers. As the last bike disappeared into the distance, cheers erupted across Wilson Ranch. Jake couldn't contain the pride swelling in his chest as laughter and exhilaration filled the air. They had faced down a storm and emerged victorious, stronger together than they ever would be apart. One of the neighbors exclaimed, disbelief mixing with elation. Jake turned to them, filled with gratitude. "We didn't just fight for a piece of land. We fought for our way of life, our values, our community." The sun dipped low, casting a warm glow over the ranch, and the pride in the air felt electric. Neighbors gathered, embracing, laughter splitting the evening. The victory had forged connections deeper than mere friendship. It was a familial bond cemented in resilience and unity. Days turned into weeks, and the spirit of determination continued to fill Wilson Ranch. They fortified their defenses, established a network of support within the community, and ensured that they would face any storm together. Each morning they rose with the sun, tending to the land, but now they did it with buoyed hearts, ready to celebrate their shared victories. Every harvest became a celebration, and laughter rang through the diner, where families gathered to share meals and stories. The lessons of that standoff against the motor crew seeped into ordinary life, reverberating in the values they upheld. Jake often found himself staring at the horizon, contemplating the road before them. They had fought against fear and intimidation, proving that love for home and community could triumph over perceived power. The bonds woven in those moments of unity sustained them as they faced life's challenges. As seasons changed, Jake taught his children how to stand strong, how to fight for what they believed in, and to always cherish their roots. He instilled in them the understanding that true strength lay not in anger or aggression, but in love and community qualities that could withstand any storm. In time, talk of Terry's gang faded into whispers of the past. The ranch flourished, and the community thrived, never forgetting the crucial lesson learned that day about standing together. Years later, Jake stood once more on his porch, looking out over the sprawling fields. A new generation of children played among the rows of corn, laughter spilling through the air like sunlight. The simple beauty of life filled him with hope and contentment. He felt the breeze on his face, a gentle reminder that they had made it through. The struggles, the victories, they all stitched together a narrative that defined who they were as a community. As night fell, the stars appeared overhead, twinkling brightly against the darkness, each one a reminder of strength, connection, and a shared future illuminated by the fierce love for the land they called home. And he knew, as long as they stood together, nothing would ever come between them and the legacy they had built. This ranch would remain theirs, rooted in love, fortified by courage, and unyielding against all adversities. The sound of rumbling engines echoed across the vast expanse of Wilson Ranch, shattering the morning tranquility. Jake Wilson stood at the edge of his property, eyes narrowed against the glaring sun, as a line of motorcycles emerged from the swirling dust. A knot twisted in his stomach, a mix of dread and defiance tightening his grip on the wooden fence post before him. These were not just any riders, they were Terry's crew, a gang notorious for bulldozing their way into small towns, pressuring hardworking farmers into selling their land for cheap. Rumors of their tactics had spread like wildfire, tales of threats and intimidation that left families shaken and desperate. Jake had spent his life cultivating this land, pouring both sweat and love into every furrow. Today, it felt as if that very soul was about to be tested. As the engines roared closer, Jake felt an instinctual rage bubbling within him. Memories flashed in his mind, the laughter of his children as they chased each other in the fields, the sweet smell of freshly tilled soil in the spring, the countless sunsets he had shared with his wife on this porch. He was ready to defend it all. The first bike came to a halt, skidding to a stop just feet away. Terry, a mountain of a man with a scruffy beard and piercing eyes, swung off his bike. He strutted toward Jake like a lion surveying its territory, his crew spreading out behind him like a pack of wolves. Terry called out, voice booming as though the very ground trembled beneath him. "We've got some business to discuss. It's time for you to sell this ranch." Jake straightened up, heart pounding but resolute. "This land belongs to me and my family." Terry's grin widened, revealing an unsettling confidence. "You really think you can stand up to us? Look around, you're alone out here." Jake took a deep breath, feeling the strength of the land beneath his feet. He scoffed. "You must not know this community very well. I might be standing here now, but I'm not alone." A flicker of confusion passed over Terry's face, but he quickly regained his composure. "You think your neighbors will back you up? They're probably scared just watching you chat with us." The tension in the air thickened like a storm cloud gathering. Jake could feel his pulse quickening, but he didn't flinch. He had fought too long and hard to let fear dictate his life. "It won't be hard at all. You're the ones who don't belong here." Without warning, a figure stepped out from behind a nearby barn. It was Tom, Jake's neighbor, a man whose hands were as rough as the rugged terrain they lived on. He strode forward, determination etched into his features. Tom challenged, voice steady. The other neighbors began to emerge, faces filled with equal parts anger and resolve. Clara, a woman known for her fierce spirit, held up a pitchfork, the rising sun glinting off its metal. "You think you can march in here and push us around?" Jake felt a rush of gratitude as solidarity surged through the gathering crowd. There was strength in their unity, a pulse of defiance against the storm they faced. The bikers shifted, unease creeping into their ranks as they tried to keep their confidence intact. Terry glanced at his crew, their bravado cracking under the pressure of community. He scoffed, though the words lacked conviction. "What are you gonna do?" "Our tools are just fine," Jake replied, undeterred. "We've been working this land long before you ever thought of coming here, and we'll be here long after you're gone." The sun hung low, casting a golden glow as tension heightened like a taut string ready to snap. Jake took a step closer, eyes locked onto Terry's. For a moment, silence wrapped around them, the weight of Jake's words hanging in the air like a charged current. The bikers exchanged glances, uncertainty written on their faces. Terry was losing ground, and Jake could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Terry finally spat, anger lacing his voice. But in that moment, the crowd behind Jake surged forward, their united front igniting a fire in his heart. "You're mistaken, Terry," Tom shouted, raising his shovel high. "We know all about strength. It's standing together, hand in hand. We'll defend this land and fight for what we love." As Jake surveyed the scene, he felt the swell of courage rise inside him. He could hear the faint rustle of leaves, the whispers of his ancestors encouraging him to stand firm, and he wouldn't back down, not now. "Leave this place, Terry," Jake urged. "You don't want this fight." But Terry snarled, his bravado fraying at the edges. "You think this is over?" And just like that, the tension snapped. Bikers hesitated, the bond of fear and aggression faltering beneath the weight of Jake's unwavering stance. Jake proposed, voice calm yet powerful, cutting through the chaos. For a brief, electrifying second, the air shifted. The gang began to retreat, quiet murmurs spreading through their ranks. Uncertainty slipped through their facade as they took a step back, perhaps realizing they had underestimated the heart of the kind of strength that lies within a community. Without a word, the engines roared back to life. The bikers turned their bikes and sped off down the gravel road, leaving a cloud of dust behind as their figures diminished in the distance. Cheers erupted from the crowd, and Jake felt a rush of triumph flood his veins as adrenaline surged through him. They had done it. They had stood together, facing down intimidation and fear, and they had shown that love for the land and for each other could conquer anything. It worked, Tom shouted, laughter spilling from his lips like a wave crashing against the shore. "I can't believe they backed down," Clara added, her voice radiant with victory. "Together, we're unstoppable," Jake declared, heart full as he surveyed the faces around him. They were allies, friends, a community forged in strength and resilience. But as the sun sank lower in the sky and the cheers echoed in the distance, Jake felt a mixture of gratitude and tension settle in his chest. They had repelled Terry's crew today, but there were still voices of doubt and worry that lingered in the back of his mind. After the crowd dispersed, Jake gathered his neighbors around for a moment of reflection. "This day marks something significant. We stuck together when it mattered most. Let's remember this moment and ensure we strengthen our ties moving forward." As the days turned into weeks, the spirit of resilience lived on under the golden sun. They fortified their defenses, planted stronger crops, and celebrated life together through meals and laughter. Support flowed through the community, a bond that deepened with every shared struggle. Time passed, and the motor crew became a distant memory, replaced by the undeniable connection that flourished among the neighbors. Jake reveled in the newfound unity, a powerful reminder that love and loyalty could triumph over threats and fear. But even as the ranch began to see a resurgence, Jake knew the world outside was uncertain. There would always be the chance of trouble lurking around the corner. One evening, he gathered his children on the porch, feeling the need to pass down the lessons learned through the fight. He asked, glancing at their young faces, "It's not just about farming, it's about family and community." His children nodded, their young minds absorbing every word, forming images of courage and determination. The laughter of those who had come together echoed in their ears, a soundtrack to their childhood shaped by resilience. As time went on, Jake's kids grew up, becoming an integral part of the ranch and the community. They learned how to nurture the land, to appreciate each day, and to fight for their values. They met friends and families along the way, others who joined the effort to build a community that could withstand any storm. In the quiet of night, when darkness blanketed the skies, stars twinkled above like whispers of hope, casting shadows on the fields below. Jake would often find himself reflecting on the courage they had summoned, the bonds they had forged, and the beauty of their way of life. Every morning, he would rise with the sun, grateful for the opportunity to walk the lands that had witnessed so much. The ranch thrived, not just from good harvests, but from the strength they had cultivated as a community. And with every sunset, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, a quiet promise that they wouldn't just survive, they would thrive. The day those bikers stormed the ranch remained etched in memory, a symbol of their collective strength. It wasn't merely a clash over land. It had become a battle for identity, resilience, and love. Years later, the echoes of that fight still reverberated in the hearts of all who lived and worked at Wilson Ranch. They had seized the day, and in doing so, had built a legacy rooted in courage, hard work, and unity that would live on in the stories they told, and in the laughter of children playing in the fields. And so, the ranch continued to bloom, thriving as the years passed, a testament to triumph over adversity, a beacon of hope that underscored the power of community and the unwavering spirit of those who dared to stand against the storm. The dust kicked up behind the roaring motorcycles, swirling like a threat carried by the wind. A cloud of uncertainty hung over Wilson Ranch as Jake Wilson stood on the porch, the sun casting harsh shadows on the ground. He squinted into the distance, the distant growl of engines pulling him from his thoughts. When the first glimpse of leather and chrome came into view, his heart raced. Terry's crew was making their way down the gravel road, a merciless pack of bikers known for storming into small towns and coercing locals into selling their land. They didn't come with pleasantries, they came to intimidate. It was a scenario Jake had dreaded, a nightmare whispered about in the quiet corners of the diner. No farmer ever expected to stand face to face with a force like this. As the riders approached, Jake felt the weight of generations pressing down on him. This land belonged to his family. He had worked it, nurtured it, and loved it. Memories flooded his mind, the laughter of his kids running through the fields, the pride of a good harvest, the countless sunrises that painted the horizon. There was no way he would let Terry and his gang take it away. The rumble of engines stopped, and the gang members fanned out like predators, surveying their territory. Terry, tall and broad-shouldered with a beard that hid the cruel smile beneath, strode toward Jake, confidence radiating off him. Well, if it isn't Jake Wilson, we've come to talk, he drawled, his voice dripping with condescension. Jake stood tall, grounding himself in the dust of his land. There's nothing to talk about, Terry. You can turn around and leave. Terry chuckled, the sound harsh in the stillness. You're not selling, huh? I think you're going to change your mind real soon. You really think you can just stand here and refuse us? The air crackled with tension, every word a challenge. Suddenly, the weight of the moment was lifted when a figure emerged from behind the barn tom, his neighbor, holding a shovel as if it were a sword, determination etched on his face. Get off our land, Terry. Behind Tom, other familiar faces began to emerge, friends and neighbors who had lived in this community for years. Clara, known for her fierce spirit, stepped forward, pitchfork raised high. We stand together, Terry. A rush of adrenaline surged through Jake. He wasn't alone. A tidal wave of defiance was rising, ready to crash over the bikers. Jake's voice rang out, steady and strong. The gang members exchanged uncertain glances, the bravado in their posture wavering as if their numbers were no longer enough against the fire igniting within the community. Terry's arrogance flickered. You think this is a joke? Jake took a step forward, the sun glinting off the tools in the hands of his neighbors. You don't know who you're messing with. We've fought for this land and we'll fight for it now. The tension in the air thickened, heavy with confrontation. It was a classic standoff, the strength of community against the menace of a gang. Jake felt the support behind him like a wall of courage, and it made him brave. You should leave now, Terry, he said, his voice booming. But Terry didn't budge. You think you and your little farm crew can take us on? Jake's heart pounded. He glanced back at his neighbors, who stood resolute, spirits unbroken. They'd spent years cultivating relationships, sharing meals, and fighting personal battles together. This was their home, and they would defend it together. I'll show you power, Jake said, leaning into Terry. The bikers began to shift, doubt filling the ranks. One by one, their expressions changed from menace to uncertainty. Terry's bravado began to crack. We'll see how brave you are when the sun goes down, he spat, but there was a flicker of hesitation. As if sensing the shift, one of the bikers in the back began to look uneasy, ready to turn his bike around. Could it be that the gang was feeling the weight of the gathered strength? Jake seized the moment. This isn't just about land, Terry. It's about family, history, and pride. Terry stood rooted, caught between rage and that suffocating uncertainty, and for a fleeting moment Jake saw a crack in the armor. You're all bluffing. But Clara's voice rose above the whispers, sharp and unwavering. We stand for each other. The gang exchanged confused glances, the resolve among them crumbling. As darkness drew near, it seemed as if the very ground trembled beneath them, the weight of what they were fighting for amplified. With the sun dipping low in the horizon, casting long shadows across the ranch, Jake took a bold step forward. Terry turned to his crew, sensing their wavering loyalty, and the grip on his own certainty begins to weaken. Fine, he finally shouted, voice heavy with defeat. We'll leave. And just like that, the gang revved their engines, one by one taking off down the gravel road, leaving a trail of dust and uncertainty in their wake. The sun set behind them, and cheers erupted from Jake's group, a chorus of hope and defiance rising into the evening air. They stood together, breathing hard, hearts racing with elation and relief. Jake felt the warmth of victory wash over him, but beneath the triumph was a flicker of unease. What else could Terry and his gang throw at them? As the stars began to emerge in the inky sky, Jake gathered his neighbors around him, hearts united in their recent struggle. Tonight we've proven that we can face threats together. Let's remain vigilant. Nods of agreement rippled through the crowd. The bond they were forming now felt unbreakable, yet Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something more was coming. As people began to disperse and the laughter faded into the night, he stood looking out at the fields like guardians standing in watch. In the weeks that followed, life on the ranch returned to its routine, but a specter loomed between the rows of corn and awareness that they hadn't seen the last of Terry's crew. Night after night, Jake lay awake, his mind racing. Each creak of the house and whisper of wind seemed to echo with the lingering threat of what was to come. One evening, just as dusk painted the sky with deep oranges and purples, a loud revving of engines shattered the stillness once more. The sounds were closer this time, the promise of trouble looming near. Jake's heart sank, every instinct telling him to prepare. He rushed outside, heart pounding, and his instincts were right. Terry had returned, but this time he wasn't alone. A dozen more bikers surged behind him, a fierce and determined swarm. The crew had gathered reinforcements and they were ready for a fight. Jake felt the unmistakable cold grip of fear, but he fought it down. This was the moment of truth. As the gang pulled up, Terry stepped down from his bike, an undeniable malice painted across his face. "Did you really think we'd let that slide?" Panic ignited in Jake's chest. He turned to gather his neighbors who were rushing toward him, ready to stand together once more. But he could see the fear in their eyes. This was a larger force than before, and they could easily be outmatched. Terry taunted, stepping towards him, the darkness casting an ominous shadow over the confrontation. "What'll it be?" Jake felt the heat of anger rise within him, but doubt flickered in his mind. What if they lost? What if their lives were shattered in the process? Would he be able to handle that weight? Suddenly, he caught the gaze of his neighbors, their faces set with unwavering determination. They were ready to face the storm. "We fight for what is ours," Jake called out, his voice shaking but resolute. As the night closed in, tension surged. The sound of engines revving filled the air like a war cry. Would this be the night they truly stood against the darkness, or would they crumble beneath the threat of Terry's gang? As the stakes rose, Jake prepared himself for what lay ahead. They faced not just the danger of the gang, but their own fears and uncertainties. The world felt like it was teetering on the edge, and only time would tell what kind of fight could be won or lost underneath the stars.